What's happening? I guess I gotta move this up now so people can actually hear me. Hi. Oh my goodness. Now. It's kind of weird hearing your own voice. Oh, it's messing me up so much. All right. So as this, yeah, turn it down just a hair. A lot more than a hair. Big hair. How about now? Can you hear me? How about now? Can you hear me now? The problem is the delay, and so it really messes with your mind. All right, so that's going to mess me up big time. How about now? I'm being yelled at by technical. Okay, sweet. How's that sound? That look good? Great. So they can hear me. All right, so gotta love technical stuff, huh? All right, like I said, my name's Jesse Evans. I've been doing this since about 2016. First class I took was over at Virginia Institute of Blacksmithing. It was a basically very beginner class and dealt with a coal forge, and we ended up taking a piece of 1/4-inch rod and actually making a knot out of it. So it's pretty cool. If you've never done it, actually making an overhand knot out of a 1/4-inch rod is pretty neat for hammer control. But I was like, all right, I've taken a piece of metal that you normally can't bend or anything else, and I've made a knot out of this thing. I thought that was pretty cool. So a couple of weeks ago, we did people were asked how many people knew how to do collars. And there's very few people who raised their hands or whatnot, so I've done a couple. My final project for the class is right there. You can see I did a couple collars for the when I did the year-long certification over there at Virginia Institute of Blacksmithing. That was back in 2020. Like I said, it took me about 159 hours plus on there. And that was mainly because I didn't actually connect down the sides when I was working on the tenons. When you put it on a big table and you try and work on one end, and it moves and gets odd angled, it really messes you up. So good lesson learned from it. Next one I do won't take that long. But everything on here is traditional joinery. You got the gussets up here, the tenons there, or rivets right there. Forge welds all throughout. Got collars up top, collars on here. So just it's fun to do. I enjoy doing blacksmithing. I'm not an expert, not by any means. So Bruce said I was an expert. He unfortunately was not right on that, because I don't get paid for my work. So unless I sell it at bazaars or whatnot, but I don't make my living off of it, as some people might. So today we're going to talk about joinery. Forge weld, we're not going to do any of that, but we're going to do tenons, and we're going to work on collars. And if we have some time, we get some other options. We'll show you a couple different types of joinery and stuff. You can take a look at that a little bit later on. I did a class up in New England School of Metalwork. By the way, that's up in Maine. So if you're signing up for the class, understand you have to go up to Auburn, Maine. So Peter Braspenix, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he does some really neat stuff on Facebook. It's really wild on how he gets the metal to move and things, how it connects. And so was doing a class. Last year he did a couple classes, found out that this year he was only doing one class, and where was it? New England School of Metalwork. So I signed up for the class, and then I found out where it was. But I wanted to take his class. It was a week-long class. It was pretty fun. Did that back in a couple months ago, May time frame. So I thought it was pretty neat. So that's where we did some of those lap connections and stuff like that, and the different joinery. My suggestion for everybody is that once a year, either through John C. Campbell down in North Carolina, or New England New England Metalworks up in Maine, or even over in Virginia Institute of Blacksmithing, pick at least once a year a week-long class and go to that class. If you need to camp or stay in a hotel or whatever, my suggestion is to do it, because that's when they bring in those big artists, and you can go take a look and you can learn from them. The only way you're going to improve is to learn. Especially with joinery, there's only so much where you're actually going to learn here. and from each other. So find those other classes. Go out to SOFA, watch the demos there. You don't have to buy a lot of stuff. Or the Forged Iron, or the Abandoned Iron to Art Festival up in Pennsylvania. They bring in people for those weekend classes and stuff, and go up there, go take a look, see what they're making. All right, so for today, we're not going to make this whole thing, we're going to make part of it. Because the focus here is on the tenons and the holes, and then also the collars. So I already have a couple pieces and stuff, I'll knock those out. And this one's going to actually be on display. It was going to be in a hat, but Bruce said that it cannot be because he wants to put it on display. There you go, pass it around. All right, so majority of those pieces are already gotten laid out. Like I said, we're going to knock out the holes and we can do the tenon, and then we'll attach the scrolls with the couple collars. This one first. Yes, please. I guess I better put my name on too. Yep.
See your evidence on your apron. Yeah, he is on purpose.
Evans.
No, but I mean on the gate.
Yeah.
I was looking at that too. Yeah, I was like, oh, what a freak move. And I'm like, very cool.
All right, so for the first thing we're going to do, we're going to knock out the tenon first. And the reason behind it is that if I knock out my hole first on this piece, then I'm trying to make my hole the same size as my tenon. If I have my tenon, then I can adjust my hole, make it a little bit go up in small increments, therefore my tenon will fit in there nicely. So first thing you're going to make is for the tenon. All right, for what we're going to be doing 3/8. We're going to do a 3/8 tenon. Now the question is, how long do I make my tenon? If you look at a couple of different books and stuff, they'll tell you to do a 1.5 to 1.5 times the tenon diameter or tenon thickness. I keep moving around a lot. So basically you need to make it long enough to make it through the item and then have a little bit on the end sticking out about a 1/4 of an inch, so therefore you can peen it over. Otherwise, if you don't peen it over, then it's not going to stick and not going to connect. All right, for a couple different steps when you're doing a tenon. So figure out what length we need, which is based off the material we have. We're running 1/2 inch bars. Everything is 1/2 inch. By the way, I like these little hook rulers. Work out great. So you don't have to just say, oh, do you right? So 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch square is what we're using. So therefore we're going to end up ending up with about a about 3/4 inch tenon. Now when you take the 1/2 inch bar, you're going to smash it down. You're going to butcher it first. We'll go through all the steps of butchering, drawing out, and get you the right length. And sometimes, a lot of times afterwards, you'll have a little bit too much on there, but that's fine. I'd rather have a little bit too much than a little bit less than what I need. The reason behind that is I can easily cut off the 3/8 piece off the end. But if it's too short, then I have to go through all the butchering and extending it out and drawing it. Which, if it's already 3/8, which is where I want it, then I have to take material from the parent stock and try to make it long enough. Now, a couple different ways you can do the butchering on it. Easiest that I go with is a lovely little blacksmith magician. By butchering, what I mean is I'm going to take it almost like a wedge type deal. Wedge on the top and the bottom. And I'm forcing the material to go out more at an angle. Actually, I do it that way. So towards the beginning, when I first started, that's actually what's going to end up being, sticking out a little bit.
Show them that or not.
Oh, for you. Wait. Now the means you can do it is also using a hot cut. Do it, but by doing it with the missing magician available at Blacksmith Supply. Then I can get both the top and the bottom. The key though is not to get all the way through. You're not trying to cut it in half. If you cut it in half or cut it too far, then that's where you're going to run into problems with your tenon. You start working it, it's going to end up moving it back and forth. You're going to get cuts. It's going to shear off. Then you have to start back again. If you ever get one of these, good idea. Throw a little sacrificial piece on the top, so therefore you don't end up mushrooming over the top of it. Throw this up there, therefore if it gets too messed up, you can chop it off. Keep going. Some of my other ones I don't use as much, or don't need to be as much force on it. I just leave it kind of flat. All right, so we're going to stick it into the guillotine tool here. Let's do back up a little bit. How far back do I want to go? So I want at least 3/4, correct? The tenon diameter or the thickness of the tenon? So it's going to end up after it's drawn out, because I'm starting with a 1/2 inch. So I'm taking it down to 3/8. So that amount of material, because in blacksmithing, we basically are mass movers. So we're going to take that mass that's here, and when we draw it down, it's going to draw it out. It's going to get hot. Handy dandy clay. So when I put it in there, I'm going to put it down, give it a little tap, turn it, tap. If you take a look at the clay, as you can see with the camera and stuff, if you notice in this area, I have a pretty nice shoulder right there, and it's taking all the other material and going out. So I'm taking, instead of trying to push the material back this way, I'm actually drawing it out that way. That's why I like my apron. If you notice, I turned it at an angle, so therefore I can still feel it. If I move it, it won't slide, but it still has a hold of that. Key also with this is that when you do it, you try to keep this at a level. Otherwise, you'll cause all kinds of different problems with it. You can see. Probably heat it up and actually we'll go with that. Like I said, you don't want to go too deep because the problem is, like I said, you'll end up cutting it off or you start moving it and then you run into big issues that way.
Just trying to make it this thing line in order to then take it, right?
Yes.
So that taper it up.
All right, on the next one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the... So now I have to isolate that material and start drawing it out. Now I can try to do it right here, but remember how close I have to get back to here. I don't want to crush that shoulder. So an easy method to do it is also, another Smithy Magician, put it in there, lock it in. You can see how you can start isolating those shoulders. Might as well use the tools available, right? Yes, you can do all of this with a hammer, but if you have the items available, then use them. People say that traditional blacksmiths wouldn't have done that. Yeah, they would have. They were in the business of making money, plain and simple. They wanted a living. Traditional blacksmith, whether you like it or not, time is money. Any business person, anybody that does anything with their hands, time is money. Materials you have to pay for, that's just going to happen. But where you make your money is how fast can you do it. And that is where time, knowing how to do it, and repetition is going to come into play. Would a traditional blacksmith have used a MIG welder? I say yes. Why? Because guess what? They invented them. If nobody would have ever used them, they would never have invented them. People find an easier way. So that's why they invented this stuff.
Plus you're doing so many, like you said, oh, I did it all by hand. Great to say, but then you've got 200 more hours to do it or something like that. You're just pushing, you're getting that down to the marks of the original cut, right?
Yep.
That was your step.
Because once I get it down closer, then I'm going to use this other one.
Yeah.
And this will actually get me to the size I want. The 3/8. Yeah, on these, you have a 3/8 and you have a quarter. For the material that we're using, a quarter would be a little bit too small to do. You could do a quarter, but the problem is that as far as structural wise, you're going to lose it. Oh yeah. You can see how it's starting to bring it down to the size in comparison to the shoulder right there on this side. Now, the faster way is going to be to do it with the hand hammer, which is what I'm going to go to next. But if I want to get, when I get close to that shoulder, then I'm going to go back to this. So you don't have to stick to one process. You can go back and forth. You're doing it, nobody else. That's the cool thing about going and seeing different blacksmiths. You even see different ways of teaching. Like when you go to Virginia Institute of Blacksmithing, Dale Morse has been doing it since he was 18. But he did it as actually ran a shop, owned a shop. Money is what he's after. So the process for how good he got it to versus how good a artist, how much they would work on it is a little bit different. As an artist, you look at the stuff, and I'm sure you know too, Ted, you look at it, as an artist, you can always find something else you can tweak. Until you spend like 1,000 hours on a piece that's really small. Will you ever get 1,000 hours back on that, money-wise? No. So you get to the point, it's like, all right, that's close enough. That was the interesting part when I went up to see Peter Braspinix. His side was more the artistry side. So he would spend a lot more time finessing a piece versus Dale Morris, which would actually get to the aspects of like, all right, I know this more, but it looks good. But as my eye, what I know, what I want, then I've gotten to where I need to be. I can keep going with this. I can keep finessing, keep moving it, but time is money. Can you turn this up a little bit? We're only sitting at like 4 psi coming out. At home, I normally have mine sitting about 8. So when I'm pulling it out, it's a lot cooler than when I'm normally.
You're running gas on the grill?
On that one is coal.
Yeah, okay.
But at home, I have a coal, which is my normal one, but I also have a Whisper Mama, which is similar to these right here for my propane. All right. Oh, wow. Sweet. All right, so as you can see, I've kind of brought it down. So I bring the tenon down a little bit. I'm going to go back to the Smithy Magician and bring it down, and I just get a little bit closer down here. Problem is, like I said, I don't want to mess up my shoulder. Sweet. Yeah, that's fine. Let me get my face out of there. We have a tool rest. There we go. What's that? No side door?
Yeah. Yeah, but the one in the front is a passenger, right?
Well, that's fine because I'm only working at the end. So that'll work fine. Even when I'm punching the hole, hole's going to end up being right about there. So I still got enough room. I'm not trying to hit a hole in the middle for what we're working on. Go back. Bring it back in. Get a little bit closer to where it went in my shoulder. Yep. What's that? Thank you, sir. Sweet. I forget they're there. All right, so on the next one, I'm actually going to move over to the tenon guide. Key thing on this is make sure the big is with the big and the little is with the little. Otherwise, looks really funny and doesn't work out too well. Top half will be 3/8, the top half will be 3/4. It'll be a quarter. So if I do not have this down to size, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to get little leaves or parts coming on the side. The center is 3/8, which is what I want, but if I'm not down the right size, then I'm going to get little wings coming out. I don't really want that, so that's when I have to go back to the hammer and bring it a little bit down more to size for what I want. You can see right there on the end where it's actually working out all right.
Right.
Right on the end there. I can't walk around. I'm not allowed to. And I got my like little bubble here. I need like marks on the ground or something. Ooh, ah. Ting tang, walla walla bing bang. Ooh ee ooh ah, ting tang, walla walla bing bang. Will that work better for you?
What's that?
Will that work better for you?
How about golly shucks?
Golly gee. But you always got to throw out your leg going, golly gee shucks. All right, so once we get the tenon finished, we'll go ahead and start punching the hole. Warm. Would you mind giving me a thing of water so I can quench my tongues a little bit? I put them up against my shoulders like, that's getting warm.
Yeah, we haven't seen you cool off the yet.
Well, if you look at where I'm holding it, all the way back here, it has all that heated material to get to. Here, listen to the difference real quick. You hear that?
Yeah.
Now, hear the difference? So when it's actually all the way down, that's what you're going to be hearing, versus otherwise it's a little bit softer. Thank you, sir.
So you know you've made the correct diameter. Pulling it back, right?
and turning it.
inch and a half of 48, whatever.
And I'm pulling back and, what's that? Smithing Magician is that the technical one for this one. Remember this one, don't you, Tom? So when I first bought this thing, I did not realize that you actually needed a oxyacetylene torch to do some of the pieces on it, or to do these rivets. So Tom was nice enough to actually help me put it together. Because as you can see, some of them aren't that great, and that's my fault, not his, because I tried doing it with a little map gas torch. It didn't work too well.
One of the classes on Mike's list is to have Mr. Elliott come and give us a class on making those.
Oh, there you go. Now, Bruce has a different version. Do you have yours still around?
Don't have his.
No, I mean yours.
Yeah, that's got the yesteryear Ford in that box. That's made by yesteryear Ford.
Same thing, just a little bit different. But you can make different dies and stuff just like what's on here. Or you can make this at home. I like this one because it all comes together, boom. Well, with the exception of putting the pieces together. And if I want to get the different pieces like this, they're already pre-made. All I got to do is buy them.
We're trying to work with John Elliott to buy the material. Class is the actual building instead of like the class.
There you go. Since I'm not allowed to walk around, if you take a look, see how it's all nice and round? Hammer-wise, it'd be really difficult for me to actually go and do that constantly, especially when you get back here towards the corners, towards the shoulders. So by using Smithing Magician, I can knock that out a lot faster. I said you don't have to, you can do it with a hammer, that's perfectly fine, whatever you want to do. All right, now as you can tell, you see we have a little bit of sharp shoulders right there. Anything doing with architectural wise or whatnot, you don't want sharp shoulders. Sharp shoulders will, any 90-degree angle causes issues, so that'd be your breaking point. So what we're going to do next is we're going to end up putting it in a vise. That one, right? We're going to move over to that vise right there, and I'm going to use a monkey tool. Basically, it's going to round these down a little bit, so I don't have any sharp corners right at my tenon.
You don't do it by hammer for what reason?
Speed. One, you can take any round bar and take it from square.
Depends on what you're making.
Exactly. It depends upon what you're working on. If you're doing a bigger one, or you can use a file to file it down. But once again, that's time. So whatever you want to do, whatever's more comfortable to you. It doesn't have to be one way or the other. If you get, so I work in line work. They said that if you get 50 different linemen to set one pole in the ground, you get 50 different ways to do it. Not all of them are wrong, not all of them are right. But which is most efficient, which works well for each person? Same thing with blacksmithing. You watch a person, they'll make something. Watching Mark Sperry do the collars. He did it a lot different than what I learned. So I'm going to show you what I learned because I'm not an expert at how he did it. So we'll end up actually doing the measuring.
Everybody's thing,
Melt them together.
decide you doing it like this, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
works for me.
And that's the cool part about going to the demos. And Bruce turned me on to this book, well, Maker's Notebook.
Graph paper on it.
It's got graph paper on it. I'm not the greatest drawer, so. But it works out well, and it even has a little pocket in the very back. So So if we put different things. Mm-hmm. I already have one, thank you. But by going to the demos, going to the guild, when you see something, write it down. Yeah. Either if you're technology-wise, put it in your phone or whatever. There's one we did that Carson Sams did, a Celtic cross. The dimensions on that was really interesting because I never realized the cross-sectional area of the cross and the ring are the same length. And it's 1/3 or a quarter of the length of the height is the arm. Well, if you're making them, especially if you're coming up to Christmas or anything else, like Christmas bazaars, I have a Christmas bazaar coming up at a church, then those are good numbers to know, so I don't have to go looking for them. I just look at my stuff, boom, got it. All right, going over there. All right, so since the next thing we're going to do is the monkey tool. That's this little item right here. Especially if you look up in the camera, you should be able to see that it goes down and you have edges around the side. You see that right? There you go. What that's going to do is take away the square and put more of a rounded shoulder on there. Sweet. That one's hotter. Now I'm not trying to beat the daylights out of it, I'm just trying to round off those shoulders. I'm going to put it in. Now if you notice as I'm doing it, I'm turning it at the same time. It doesn't take much. But now you can see the shoulders are a little bit more rounded right in this area.
You turn it so it doesn't stick, that's it.
Well, and then make sure you try to get it even all the way around. So any type of 90 degrees, even like on, let me put this back in the fire real quick. Actually, yeah, right back in the fire. What's that? All right. So anytime you have a 90-degree angle with anything vertical connecting to a horizontal, your stress factor is right there. That's where all your major stress is sitting. So when you have any type of stress pushing down on it, that's where it's going to end up breaking your tenon on that smallest. So by rounding it, we end up getting a little bit more material right there. So it's not as sharp of as a turn. Now for this, since it's a little plant holder, not as big of a deal. But if you can see it on here, you end up doing like gusseted tenons. So if you notice that here's a parent material, the 3/4, you actually end up upsetting, which Bruce will be talking about later on, to make this a little bit wider so it comes out, and then you put your tenon on there. And so therefore, for the physical aspect, all this weight, and this is just sitting on this parent material and using that little tenon to hold it, it actually has a little bit more weight right there. The tenon is mainly there to keep it from sliding around. Yes, more of a nice flow versus a straight 90, like in some of these right here. But these 90s right here, even these have they're still, I use the monkey tool on that to put a little bit more sway in it. But like I said, especially like types stuff like that. Where's my other box? Or when you're doing bigger stuff. Same thing, you don't want the 90. This one I did a little bit welding on because I didn't like how it turned out, but you don't want a straight 90 there because that's where you come into more of the weight of it. Because if you think about it, if I'm using this as a shelf, this is attached to the wall, everything's sitting right here. Indeed, the scroll work's going to help it a little bit for the 3-point of contact, but a lot of it's still sitting back here. That's one of the reasons why you actually do the scroll work is so you just don't have a piece sticking out. Eye-wise, it looks better, but also for a little bit more structural-wise, support the weight. Don't need that anymore. I need like a holster for that thing. A bra. Hammer. So at home, I have a tray that actually sits right here. It swivels out or swivels back. I can easily take it off if I'm doing something more on the horn. So it's nice to have that tray right there, and therefore I have all my oil and everything else just sitting right there for me. That's where my tongs sit, and then I actually have another table sitting right here, so if I need it. All right, so what we'll do right now is you see it's a little crooked. I don't know if you can tell that. But you notice how it kind of kicks over to the side? All I'm going to do is just straighten it up, and then I'm basically done with this. Because my goal is to actually not touch this until I peen it over next. That should work. So one thing when you deal with tenons, where did I put the thing? Oh, there it is. It's very easy to break this thing when it starts getting cold and you're hammering on it, because all that stress gets put right there on that edge. So therefore, if it gets too cold, like right now, if I try hitting on it, I could lose that tenon. Or if you notice, on this one, I did the hook before I did the tenon. If I'm over here working and beating on this right here, then there's a chance this tenon right here may end up snapping on me, just from the vibration aspect of it, especially if you end up cutting it a little bit too deep. So that could actually break on you. So therefore, you want to try to knock that out first, do anything scroll work or anything else like that first, and then do your tenon. Because otherwise, you have all that vibration on it, any hammering. You could twist it with the tenon being done. That's perfectly fine, because you're not putting that stress right there. You're not putting that vibration aspect of it stress. But when you, especially 3/8 isn't as bad, but if you do a 1/4 inch, which is obviously a lot smaller, then since it's smaller, less material, that's why it's going to end up bouncing and you're going to end up snapping it off. So all that work you did be for naught. All right, so for right now, we're all done with this. I'm going to set this out of the way. Good place to put it, under the forge. Good safety-wise. All right. For the vertical piece, I keep losing it. For the vertical piece, if you notice, just for S&Gs, I put a little tip on the top, a little tip on the bottom, just for looks. Doesn't have to be there. I could have twisted up or anything else like that. But if you notice, I also went ahead and drilled out my holes. Reason behind that, if I can borrow that, sir. Try and drill a hole into here. It's going to be really difficult when you put that piece in there. So therefore, you go ahead and prep it beforehand. You know where your holes need to go. And therefore, you go ahead and drill out your holes, knock them out. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Da-da-da. Also, I pre-punched a little mark, center punch mark on my vertical piece to not know where I'm going to end up punching it. Keeps my hand away from the fire. And I like the clamp because therefore I can just set it right there. If you have a punch, a handheld punch, it starts to get very hot on the bottom of your hand. A couple options you can do is, for one, take your hand, put it in water beforehand. It cools that bottom of your hand by the time you're done punching. I'm good. I don't need it. No. I'm not cutting, I'm punching. So anyway, another option you can do is a glove. There's left hand and right hands ones. Always good to do. Nice little L on your left hand, a R on the right.
Get that on your shoes too.
They're on the bottom. What's that? Loser! No, just but I like these. It's a good set. Tom Tongs does these, or the whole set of them. And this comes with it. Makes it nice and grab it. And I like using the clamp because I don't have to worry about trying to grab it or anything else. I can set it on here. So therefore, when I bring my material over, set it down, have the hold fast on it, which I need to get. There it is. Put it on there, then I can punch it. Now, if you notice over here on the side, I have a little container of oil. It's vegetable oil is what it is. Run the mill, buy it from the store, cheapest you can find. So because of the amount of heat I'm going to do with this, it's only going to be about 3 hits, and then I got to put it in the water. Because otherwise, if I get this too hot, I'm going to deform it, and then I'm going to have issues. That's going to put it in the oil. I used to put it in water, but then I bought a set of punches from Fiery Furnace Forge, and actually specified to put it in oil. So like, all right, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you think how fast the water shocks it versus oil, which doesn't take as much of a shock on it. So if you're going to do it, just be aware that you have, especially if you have a concrete floor, watch out for any slipping hazards. At home, I work on a gravel floor. I don't have to worry about oil or anything else falling there or slipping or anything else like that, so it makes life a little bit easier. And that's also where my little table that sits right here comes into play. Therefore, I can take it and dip it, boom, boom, move on with life.
Does that eliminate the need for separate punch?
Mm-hmm.
Some people use ash.
Yep. Well, what my goal here is for cooling it. You can use the ash, or the coal ash, and what that helps is prevents the metal from sticking to the metal as you're pushing through. For what I'm punching, for the width of it, is I can knock it through no problem with this. Especially if I'm only doing 3 hits, I'm not giving this enough time to deform, to swell. But if you're using a drift or whatnot, then that's where that definitely will come into handy. Little drift I made, 3/8. So therefore when we make it through, therefore I can just go ahead and make sure that it's the right size. Now when I bring it out, do I just want to start beating the daylights out of it? No. I don't find my spot. Get it in the center. Take a look, make sure it's in the center where I want it. Cool it off. And it's kind of drifting over. Do you hear that sound? When I was punching, it was sounding soft, but now if you can hear that sound, it's a lot more solid. So, why did it make it that sound? What's that? Wrong. Say it again. Bottoming out. If you can kind of see it, see where it's nice and shiny right there versus everything else going around it. That's where I'm bottoming out. So now that's where my punch is. Now the next heat, I'm going to flip it over, and that's where I'm going to hit. So it's created a depression right there where my punch hit. So now I'll go through, I'll sink it, then I'll end up using the bolster plate that I have over top the hardy hole, and that's where I'm actually going to end up punching it through.
You're not going to want it as hot, are you? So that it shears more than.
Correct. So if metal is hot, it will deform like he was talking about. But the goal on this is I'm not trying to deform it, I'm trying to shear that little piece off. So at first it's going to, you'll notice when I do it, at first it'll be hot because I'm still trying to get pushed into that metal. But it'll cool down and therefore then it'll actually shear and you'll have a little divot come out. All right, bolster plate. If I try to do anything over here with this hardy, especially with this material, then it's basically just going to try to deform the whole material. So what I need to do is I have what's called a bolster plate. As you can see, different holes in it. Some people do it this way. Some people have a solid piece of bar that they use. But basically, it's to make that hole smaller. So therefore, when I'm punching, I'm actually going to punch and end up punching through here, and it's not going to deform my material that I'm working on. At home, instead of using a holdfast like this, I actually have a chain that connects from here, comes over top the anvil with the window weight on it. So therefore, I can still use my Pritchard hole. Because at home, I'll end up using my Pritchard hole because it's a lot smaller versus the 1-inch hardy hole. But since the Pritchard hole might be needed for the hold down, and when I do it, it's going to be a little bit harder to grab this and spin it around. So therefore, I'll just use this. Therefore, I got my hole, it's a little bit smaller versus trying to deform my material. Send my way. I don't want that one, this one. Headache. So if you notice, the material is cooling down a little bit, which is perfectly fine. Make lots of noise. Gravity's on, just to let you know. If you can kind of see right there on how I've gone through one side, if you flip it over, you see on how it's kind of punched up through. So basically, I know I can go through it. Sometimes you get that little piece, not quite there, but I still have enough heat in here right now that I can go ahead and punch it through without worrying about it. And there it goes. No. As you can see, it made it through, no problem.
Cool. That's what we're going to say.
Cool, cool.
Cool, man.
So if you notice, it got a little bit deformed. It kind of was off a little bit, so now we got to fix it. For one, we got to make sure it's big enough. 3/8 material, a little sacrificial piece. Not quite there yet to go through. So what I'm going to do is I'm still using my punch. You see it goes up a little bit sizes higher. I can go ahead and use this and open it up a little bit. Something like that. It's still warm. All right. So by using this little piece right here, because we're going to end up hammering on, I won't actually use my material that, or the other piece, the horizontal piece, to use my tenon to better shape that up. So whenever you do knocking out a hole, it's best to grab a piece, either size it down to what you need, 1/4 or 3/8, and to use that as more like your drift. So you can put it inside, you can actually hammer on it without crushing your hole. Because all that work you just did, if you go in there and you hammer through, guess what? I'm going to crush my hole. Doesn't do me any good. There we go. Get out of the way. Almost. Gravity is on. Just want to let you know, in case you're curious. Almost there. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but what I did about halfway through after hitting it is I flipped it over. If I hit it based off the size of this, if I just hit it on one side I'm going to be able to get my material through, but the other side is going to be super huge. That's not what I'm aiming for. So therefore, you got to flip it over and get the other side too. Widen it on both sides. Remember, you're working with a piece of metal that your hole's going on two sides. A lot of times we get hyper-focused just on the one side and not actually think about the other side. Very easy to do.
Do you want to divot on the back side so you have room for a flush head?
That depends upon depends upon what you want to do. Because for this particular item, it's going up against the wall. So if I have a big tenon sticking out on the backside, then it's not going to go flush up against the wall very well. So by having that over on this side, it's a little bit wider than all my tenon's going to be. I have two options. I can either A, use that, or where did I put that thing? Or I can use this, a ball bearing on a piece of metal, which is the same thing I used to actually make the divots in here for the inset.
Could have been switched around. Could have put the tenon here and then the hole on this one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. However you wanted to do it.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time anyway? How are we doing on time? Sweet. All right. All right. Yes. Why do you got to tell secrets? There we go. I'm done with that. Yes. Because I don't want to take my other piece, since I know it's a 3/8, and that's what's really nice about using the Smith Magician is I know it's a 3/8.
Yeah.
It's exactly 3/8.
Like you said, you're not hitting that through.
Yep. The main thing is I want to be able to go through.
Yeah.
Now right now what I can do is I'll put this heat back up, put this actually inside, and then I'll better shape that because you see how it's kind of sticking over. And any type of hitting I do on top of this because that's the thinnest piece of metal on the top and the bottom. That's where it's going to bend the most. So I don't want that collapsing. So by putting something in there, it puts space in there in that void, and therefore you can bend it around and move around a little bit more, make life a little bit easier. Don't need this anymore. Well, all right, can I grab a hold of this piece of metal right here? I wouldn't advise it. You can do what you want, but I'm not touching it. But if you notice, I kind of got it a little bit straight, a little bit back to where I want it. I do it again and clean it up a little bit more. But once again, you don't want it to get too cool and hit it, because when you have a small piece, and whenever you have cold and start with a small piece, and that's what will end up being your breaking point. It's on fire. Cool. Little trick about cooling off metal. If you see water droplets on there, then it's cool enough to touch. It means it's not steaming up the metal. There's a lot of times we'll take it and we'll put it in the water. We'll see the steam, we'll pull it out, and I guess it'll still be hot. It'll be hot to touch, it's too hot to hold. But if you see the water droplets on there, it's not steaming. It's a good indicator. Use a little divot. You've seen it before.
Oh, that's what came through?
Yep.
Is that hot?
No, it's not. It's in my fingers. I'm not going to give you something hot. There you go. Dollar ticket. Most expensive metal known to man. What's yeah? You put it in a cup and then put a cup next to it.
What you say earlier, you can either knock it up, get on with the business, or fiddle with it for now.
Exactly. Biggest thing though is that people will notice the eye will catch something that's not straight. You'll look at it like, that's just not right. But then you get closer, that's when you can actually look at it and see, all right, maybe it's off a little bit. So you see it's off just a hair. Right in this area. Kind of goes up to the right a little bit. A little bit better. Where do you go? There are my hands. So what you can do right now, especially if your other piece is cool, been sitting for a while, you can go ahead and dry fit it, see how it looks, how it feels. So it's almost there, but then I'd have to hit it a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the drift and actually open it up just a hair. So notice when I put the drift in it, that it wasn't quite there. So I'll open it up just a little bit, make life a little bit easier. Now, if I was really good and I actually got the punch where it was supposed to go in the center, then a lot of this other stuff would be a little bit different. But guess what? Teaching opportunity. Haha. What's that?
I said, oh, you just bring it over to your drill press.
There you go. It's an option.
They don't see that.
I've done that too.
Yeah.
But for demonstrating purposes.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, like I said, you can do the drill of that,
Mm-hmm.
and then do your rod and put the hammer marks on it.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Save X amount. You're perfectly even every time.
Mm-hmm. Just depends upon what you want to do, especially like at a demo or whatnot, doing something like that.
Right.
You don't want, and what you have available.
Right. It's a loss of material with the drill. As
Correct.
opposed to the little bit that you punch through is less than the other.
What I want to do. Yeah, it should work. There we go. Mates up nice. Ooh. Ah. Ting ting while we're beaming. What happened to you? Where? What's that?
By using that punch lift, I can just widen that one side out a little bit.
Correct. Yep. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it up, and then I'm going to use my, wherever it went. Use this real quick on the back side to open that up a little bit so when I down.
So you can make it flush.
Mm-hmm. Done with this. La, 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 da, 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 da. A little bit. It doesn't take a whole lot of heat, but at least after the orange is good. There. There you go. Let's wind it up a little bit in the back. right, so as you can see, it's really long coming off the backside. And how long that tenon is? So all I really need is right about right there. 1.5 times the diameter or thickness. So I'm going to I'm going to pop open the bandsaw there, or you can do it using a handsaw or hot cut. I'm just going to go ahead and chop that off. If you use a hot cut, just be aware, because then you have a lot of movement on that tenon, and you're going to have to straighten that tenon back up. So the easiest is just knock it out on there. It's not very hot at the moment, so as far as temperature-wise, I don't have to worry about it too much. Let me set this aside. Sweet. Tones. There you go. That's about all you need right there. All right, well, the next step, I'm going to moving over to the visa, and then we're going to use the torch, and I'm going to peen that over. Then we get to go work with the collars. And, do you have any spacers, Bruce? Any spacers? Spacers for the other side? All right.
Unless you find a little scrap on the red button back there.
This might work.
That red thing might find.
This work. All right, so what I was asking for from Bruce, a lot of times when people use a vise and they just use it on one side. The problem is that because of how this is designed with the screw in the middle, is it's designed to pull everything towards the center. So when you put a piece over here and you crank down on it, what happens is this top jaw ends up twisting. So by putting a spacer over here the same size as your material, therefore now it connects on there better. And then also, instead of being at more of an angle here, these jaws are directly flat up against. At home I have a ring that sits on there with about with 1/8 spacers, so therefore I can do whatever size I'm working on. Hangs over the side, and the spacers sit right down the middle while all the other spacers are dangling. Because with those Acme threads, anything with a vise, the Acme threads are most important. You don't want to mess those up. Everything else on a vise you can fix easy. With those threads is where you come into issues. All right, big issue right now is that you don't want to be in a hurry at the moment. You want to focus on what you're doing. So for what we're making, notice where I have the hook facing. I want it to end up with hook facing in the right direction. If by chance I have the hook facing in the wrong direction, and if I have the hook facing in the wrong direction, then it's going to be upside down. Your hook is going to end up being like that. So then if you've noticed that after you peen it, oh my goodness, now I got to do something. Couple of options: twist it, or you have to redo your hook in the front. The problem with redoing the hook, then you have to a weird object you're trying to hang on to and do. And so it puts a little pressure on the peening, on the tenon you did. So something to think about. Same thing with the piece that you put on there. That's still a little warm. Since I pre-drilled these holes, and I have a little indentation for it, if I end up putting that up top, right now, it's facing in the opposite direction from what I want. So, just a couple of things to think about.
So there'd be no chance of turning that once you paint it?
Nope. You can heat it up and rotate it around, yes.
Oh,
But then you're putting, once again, more stress and pressure on here. Because what you're actually heating up is you're heating up the tenon itself. So you end up putting a twist in there. And if when you did the butchering, you went a little bit too far, then there goes your tenon. Then you end up drilling out and redoing a new tenon. How's this going to work here? All right, so a couple of different options as far as for doing the tenon. You can put it in the back of the fire, especially if you have a coal forge, and heat up the tenon doing it that way and hammer it. But the easiest thing to do, especially since we're dealing with a propane fire, is a torch. If you notice, I have the little welding tip on here. I want a controlled heat. I don't want the rosebud heat, because what I'm focusing is I'm aiming on my little piece right there, on my little tenon. So what I'm going to end up doing is right now, as you saw, I could spin it around back and forth, no problem. I'm going to heat it up first, down low, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on it, and what's going to happen is I'm going to swell out the side, so basically upsetting that little piece. Because where my focus heat is on the tenon, I'm not actually trying to upset this or anything else, and as Bruce will probably talk about later, where it's upsetted is where metal moves the most is where it's the smallest or the hottest. So since that's the smallest piece and we're going to be hitting and tapping down on there, it's going to actually swell it out, and that's where it's actually going to grab hold of the sides that I did on my tenon, or my hole. If my hole was too big, then that's where I'm going to run into problems. Then you have to kind of step back and punt a little bit, either put a little sacrificial piece in there to try and make it bigger, because your tenon is you only be able to do so much with your tenon. So when I do this, I like to use a ball peen hammer. For one, when I'm swelling it up, upsetting it, the flat side works great. And for when I'm doing the, at the end, when I'm peening it over, I like how the facets look with a ball peen. I like how the different angles of it, and it's a little bit eye-catching. Some people like to do more of a square type deal. Fine, whatever you want to do. Uh, Here. Hey, is it we got gas out there, Bruce? We got the gas on? As soon as I turn on the gas here, this goes down. That's full blast on it. Who's got the beans? You got the beans? There we go. Hell yeah. Sweet. So one thing I did before I took it off of there, if anybody's messed with this, it's a, what do they call this? A gas saver. There we go. I can't think of the words. But since I do not have, I'm not ready to go to a flame, what I did before I took it off there is I made sure that both the gas knobs and the gas and the oxygen knob was turned off. Well, safety-wise, I don't want to just spend 10 years spinning around with, and I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to crack open the fuel a little bit. There we go. You can tell it screams.
I just learned something.
And you crack open the oxygen.
Set it up this morning, it was cloudy, colder. The sun shining on the back now, and the valve, the ceiling valve went shut.
Okay, that's funny.
Just ruined sunshine.
All right, if you notice right there, I have my tip. If anybody's never messed with a oxygen acetylene torch, see my tip is nice and small right there at the end. I'm talking about that nice little blue piece. If I go ahead and open up the oxygen like that, I have long flame. That's not really what I'm looking for. If I have no oxygen, that's what you get. Bring it over. Notice I set it back down to make sure it didn't, when heated up. Now remember, you got multiple sides to this thing, so you don't not just heating it up on one side. That's what happens when you get it a little bit closer. Like my knees in the morning, snap, crackle, pop.
So you wouldn't heat it directly over top.
No, because right now, when my focus is, I want that bottom part. I want that to swell out. If I go directly on the top, then that's where my heat's focusing. Here, when I start making it go a little bit bigger, and that's when I'm going to end up still hot. This is my heat. Out of heat.
When I turn that reverse, just it slides down.
Yeah. That's why you wear glasses. We're going to change things around a little bit. Mind do me a favor? Can you hold on that real quick? All right. I'll take that. If you can put this piece right in there. You got it? Fingers good? There we go. Now I'm not fighting trying to go around the piece I'm actually working on, so it makes life a little bit easier. Therefore, I can put one hand there. all right. It's okay. We're good. I don't know if you can tell, but it's starting to swell a little bit on the sides. I don't know if you can see it by the camera or whatnot. Right around in the, it's starting to swell a lot more. Upsetting is not a fast process. It's a slow and sad process. That's why it's upsetting. What's that? Once I get it set, then it should be good to go. If you're bored, you can hold it. How's that feeling? What's that?
It's set.
I shake it, it goes flying, hits the window. All right, so now that we got that part knocked out finally. But as you can see with upsetting, it just takes a little bit of time. The goal with any time you're upsetting is, to, like I said, not to go fast. If you try to go fast, even when you're trying to upset the end of the bar, you'll end up bending stuff and moving it. But Bruce will talk about that a lot more later on probably. All right, so on to the collars, which is the other lovely part of this demo. Now, have you all heard of Francis Whitaker? He's done a lot of gates, especially up at the cathedral and everything else like that. He makes this awesome book. There we go. Called The Blacksmith Cookbook, Recipes in Iron. I think there's also version 2, another one of them, but this one has in it what he calls frosting on the collar, or frosting on the cake, or hot collars. What's really nice is it's got pictures, which is always helpful. But it's also got the different lengths and stuff that you need. That I don't know. Looks like Mike's checking for us real quick. All right, so as far as for collars, if I put a big massive collar on there, if I use this width of material on this, it would look really funny, wouldn't it? So one thing you want to watch out for collar size is not to go too big. Not to mention, if I put it on here for my scroll work, see how much wider it would be. Just eyes-wise, it's just not very pleasing to the eye. Will it work? Yeah, it'll work. But then it'll look like a like lipstick on a pig type deal. So material you want to use is the same size as your scroll, which is the same size as your parent stock. So since I'm running 1/2 inch material on my 1/2 inch square, I got 1/2 inch for my scroll work. So 1/2 inch for this. Now as far as for the dimensions, you want a so according to Francis Whitaker, the best size is 3/16. Reason behind it is it bends well. You can do thicker, but then you're fighting it a lot more. All right, but now what about the length? What length do we need? That's where the fun stuff comes into play. Stupid math. Actually, I don't want that. Use. Put that on there, good. That's what I want. Actually, where'd you do? All right, so the collar has to go all the way around it, correct? So I need to figure out how much to actually go all the way around, plus a little bit more because it's going to lap over. So I do my length right there, which right now, since I know I'm dealing with a 1/2 inch square bar, plus my scroll work. My scroll work is going to be, maybe I'll use the right size. It's sitting at 1/4 inch. So now I have the side of it. So do I just need like a 3/4 inch piece? Nope. I go all the way around it. So that 1/2 inch plus 1/4 is only one side of it, the sides. But now I need this bottom size down here, which since I know that I'm dealing with a 1/2 inch bar or 1/2 inch scroll, add my 1/2 inch. And this side, since I already know what it is going up that side, a 1/2 and 1/4. And since I'm dealing with a square, I have 1/2 inch on the top, or a rectangle. Now if I do it just this way, it won't have any lap over. It'll be coming directly to it. So that's why I need to add a little bit more. And that's where this 2.5 times the collar thickness. So collar thickness I'm doing is, remember? 3/16. There we go. Any idea for 3/16 times? This is where it's the hard part for me because I'm not very good at moving fractions and stuff like that. Luckily for us, by using that 5/16, excuse me, 3/16, he already has it written down for me, so I don't have to do that part of the math. So then you add in that to so 2.5 times is 15 30 seconds. First 16 30 seconds is a 1/2 an inch, so kind of round up towards that aspect of it. Easier to work with using halves and quarters and stuff like that. All right, so I got me 3/4 plus 3/4. What's that give me? And my half plus a half. What am I at? It's an inch. Plus my 15/30 seconds, which is about a half. So I ended up coming up to about 3. So that's how much material I need for one collar. Like I said, that's where the difficult part of it, trying to figure it out and the math aspect of it. But remember, for my half, I'm a little bit long on there. So instead of like 16/30 seconds, instead of 15/30 seconds, it's 16/30 seconds. So just something to remember when we're ending up beveling off the ends.
Does that allow for the overlap?
Well, because we're going to end up beveling it. If you notice on there, it ends up kind of about the same.
Okay.
Da-da-da. Georgia. So it's 3 inches. All right, now an option you can do right now is just use your hands and actually put it in the forge, and then we'll end up beveling this side, and then we'll end up cutting this and beveling it also. But because the amount of, by cutting it now, all you gotta do is use the tongs to hang on to it, versus beveling it later. Versus cutting it and beveling it later, then we'll have more stuff, and then we'll have a hot piece of metal trying to cut with that. It's cold, I can put my hands on it, cut it now, use the tongs. Those things are all. Where you at? So Ted was talking about tongs earlier. Something I like to do whenever I grab a pair of tongs. Indeed, they have the size on them. A lot of them do. But I always like to put my material in tongs and then pull it. Is it going to come out? Is it going to cause me issues that way? If I tried using this pair of tongs, it may look like this is the right size for it with flat stock, but it does me no good. If I can't hang on to my material, then it's going to go moving, so I'm not going to hit where I want, I'm going to get frustrated, and something's going to go flying. I love this. Get that out of the way. Not to scale, just to let you know. All right, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to bevel on both sides, but if you notice I have this bevel going down one direction, we're going to have this other bevel going up in the other direction. And the purpose of that is that when they overlap, they'll actually connect on top of each other. Now the goal is to go about 2 times the width of the 3/16, so I'm going to go back about 15, 30 seconds, so a little bit less than that. So somewhere between a 1/4 and a 1/2 inch is what I'm aiming for my bevel length. Now it's really nice dealing with a smaller piece of metal. Guess what? It heats up fast. That's warm, just to let you know. Voila. All right, when you're beveling, one thing you want to do to make sure you don't have it mushroom out is go ahead and tap down those corners. By doing so, it won't actually spread out more like a axe. Where's a good spot? There we go. I don't know if you can see too much with the camera. But if you noticed, I keep hiding stuff from myself. I love this. I got my little bevel going right down in that direction. So, to make sure that I do not pull it out of the fire in the wrong direction, what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and flip it over. So therefore, when I pull it out of the fire, it'll be exactly where I need it. So therefore, when I pull it out and it's hot, I don't have to think about it. Just pull it out, straight up, bring it over, boom. Therefore, they'll be on the opposite sides. Da, da, da.
And that ticket's just for sale, don't forget.
They are? What? Iron and hat? Uh-oh. Pull it out. Go ahead and make my bevel, my corners. All right, so on this particular project, we're making two of them. So what I need to do is I need to let this cool because I'm going to have to find the center of it. And as metal is heated up, it expands. So if I go ahead and find the center now, it will be different than what the actual true center is. So if you're putting any type of design on it, lines or whatnot, now would be the time to do it. Because after this point, once we find the center, we start bending it. It'll be a lot harder to put anything on it. So I'm going to set this over to the side. We'll get the other one. I cut two pieces while I was over there, so.
Right, because as you're beveling it,
Exactly. So if I try to find a center at the beginning, then with beveling it's changing it. So therefore, I end up floating around. All right, so on this one we did 2.5 times the collar thickness. On this particular collar, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be heating two corners. We're going to do cold the other two. If you were going to do heat on all the corners, on all 4 corners, then you only want to do two times the collar thickness. The reason behind that is that when you bend it with heat, it stretches more versus when you do it with the cold. Didn't need the hairs on my hand anymore. Flip it around so I can get the other side. think it's warm. It's another reason why I like cold forges is I don't have the blast of air coming at me. I can turn down the air. Yeah. Well, it also depends upon where you put it in the fire. If you put it up toward the top, it's going to take longer for it to heat up, so therefore you have a little bit more time. If you bury it down in the center, 30 seconds and boom, gone. Oh. Bubble off my other end. Sweet. All right, so for the next step, what you do for the collar is we got to find the center. So since we beveled it, made it a little bit longer than what it originally was, we know it's not where it was originally, so we need to find the center. And the reason behind that is so we can figure out on where we're going to start on the first bend. So I have this wonderful little ruler. I love this little thing, center finding ruler. So therefore it makes it easier to find the center instead of trying to do all the math. Use the tools out there. How about that one? Sharpen it up. All right, so what I did is I found the center on it. Mark the center. So now with my piece, since I know that this is 1/2 inch wide, I need to find my 1/4 inch on one side of it. So since this is nice, there's a 0 in the center, find my 1/4 inch. And it doesn't matter which side you want to go for first, but you only need one side. And that's going to be my first bend mark. Where it lines up. So that's where I come over to a vise. Now I want to put the short end. You notice I got to ignore that middle line. I have a short end and a long end. Short end here, long end here. I want to put the short end up top. And the reason behind that is if you don't, then it changes your measurements up when you end up bending it. And put it in the vise. So that line is just above my mark, just above my other piece. And knock it over. So therefore I have a 90-degree bend. So now I want to do my next piece is on my other side. So that's where you're going to end up coming. The easiest way is just to put it on there and mark it. Since everything's working cold. My other pencil. Correct. Now, a difficult part, and you'll see this little nice little vise that I have right here, is if you tried to put this flat into a vise with that long piece, you're not going to be able to do it. So that's when you end up using little pieces, either like this, or for the bigger piece that we can do later on, you see how thick that is? This is also adjustable. I made this so you can adjust it and move it for whatever size you need. But you're going to need a spacer, so therefore when you put it inside the vise, you can this won't be hitting the other end, other jaw of the vise. Collars are interesting, huh? Oh, you broke it. Oh, what's really nice about this piece too is it's the same size as my material, so I got 1/2 inch wide and just a little bit longer than what my collar is going to be. Tap it over. Bring it back over to the vise and square it up a little bit. And there's the first part of my collar. Time to put it together. This is where the fun part comes into play. What's that? Exactly. What's that? Biggest thing, first off, you want to lay it out and make sure where your spot's going to be. Lay it out. Go ahead and put some marks where your collar's going to end up being. That's nice if you have a pawl around, or use the tools you have in hand, or make a tool, such as that one. Or, if you're doing something big, do like Ted mentioned the other week, and put a rivet in it. If we get a chance, we'll end up doing a collar on this, a little bit bigger. But because of the size of the material, it's a pain in the butt to try to put in a vise, put a rivet in it. Or, if you want to weld it, then weld it. And then your collar covers your weld. Don't let it. If you're doing it in a flux core welder, make sure you clean up all the slag and stuff too. But at home in my forge, it's usually just me. So you figure out ways to make things work. Voila. All right. Yay, fits. Nice, snug it up. That's where this nice little piece right here comes into play. What's that?
Just amazed at the ingenuity. Can I ask you a question?
Nope. Yes, sir.
Well, it seems to be a lot of welding within the whole blacksmith. You know, if you're lucky enough, you can forge, you know, off the coal. But is that little $120 thing from Harbor Freight with the wire feed, is that worth anything?
A lot of times it depends upon what you're going to do. Hobby-wise, for what we do, for like just sticking metal together, or Viking glue is what I've been told it is sometimes. Will it hold it? Yes, for what we need to do. But remember, as far as for if you're going to do, and you know this a lot better than I do, for as far as for welding, I'm not an expert welder. But I have at home, I have a, I think it's a Lincoln, it's a flux core welder. So it doesn't have the gas, just comes out, spits, and makes a lot of stuff. And I'm not an expert welder whatsoever. He's a good person because he actually taught it. And I know Bruce has taught some classes too for the guild for using welders. But as far as for, a lot of times it depends upon application and what you're doing. If you're drilling,
Quick tack or something.
bringing something from Harbor Freight works out well.
Or something.
Perfect.
That
Exactly.
trailer. Forget it.
Exactly. You say don't use a trailer. You said don't use that on a trailer.
Harbor, I mean, I have the big one that I bought off, what's his name there? It's just, once again, you know, 110 plug versus the only 220 I have.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more dangerous.
All right, so this time for collars, what I'm going to do is use heat on 2 of the corners. The other 2 corners I did was cold, as you can saw, and I can use my fingers. I don't have to worry about tongs or anything else like that. On this one, I'm going to end up using the torch to bring it over, and by using the torch, it tightens it up a bit more. You could, but the problem is for what I want, as when metal heats up, it expands. By doing with the heat, when it cools down, it contracts, so it's actually going to tighten it up a lot more on it. So is it possible to do it that way? Yes. Let's see if that works.
When the sun shines on the regulator outdoors, it changes the state.
Well, what happens to gas when it heats up? What happens to gas when it heats up? It expands. Same thing. All right, so when you're doing this, you're not actually aiming for where you're hitting. You want to aim for down a little bit lower because I'm trying to pull that material over top. Yes, or a little bit lower than the seam. It'll actually drag that material over the top. Just remember when you're done with this that this vise is going to be a little bit warm. So don't go licking it like you normally. The one side, to the other side down low.
And he's showing you an introduction to this collar. Blacksmithing 204 is all about collar making and joinery. So look forward to that class.
Goes the weasel. Right now, because I don't have this bottom part on there yet, kind of slides a little bit, but that's the basis of it. You can also heat it up and put it back in the vise and kind of give it a little crimp and squeeze. Help kind of close it up a little bit more. But that's the basics of collars.
And the seam is right on the top.
Mm-hmm. What's really nice about using the vise is the fact it'll squeeze on both sides at the same time.
The top and the bottom, right?
Their sides. Another good reason to wear an apron is to make sure you don't catch yourself on fire. Goes a weasel. A little bit better. Once I put the one down here, then it'll close up. We have enough time for that one, or have a look at the time?
That's just duplicated what you just showed us.
Exactly.
We've got it off, so I mean, you could do it gold or whatever.
You figure where put that other piece. Should be the same thing. Find the center. Figure where I put my pencil. Oh, there's. I have about 20 of these sitting around my shop. Why? Because they keep sending them places. It doesn't matter. Then you got to remember to put them back in the holder. Mm-hmm.
Always located right where you just left it.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. That's why he has 20 of them.
What he needs to do is add a sheet, pencil sheet to his statement.
And like I said, just got to remember to put it back. One. Where ended up putting that thing? So, a question for you: would you like to see another duplicate of this one, or one more joint? Which I can do fast. So what's nice about using the material that you're same size, you can just flip it over and go.
That's what I'm saying, you don't throw anything away.
Mm-hmm. Hammer scroll comes in handy here where you don't smash your fingers.
Black fingernails.
I don't have any black fingernails. Not on this job. Where'd I put you? You are. Can't remember how I made them. Yeah, the problem I was having with the vice grips and everything else was the fact of trying to get something over there when it wouldn't fit, so modification.
So who's looking to be on the board next year?
Bruce, president.
One thing I believe in is that you shouldn't have anybody in an office too long at one time.
Was it like a re-
That was lovely.
Again?
was this like 3 years y'all have all been on the board?
Yes. We've had the same board for 3 years. Time to change up a little bit, get some new ideas, fresh thoughts.
So some of you old guys that take
People
care
can
of
burn out.
time, you know, that's all. And youngsters too.
And the burnout factor is real.
So what you're saying is you're getting tired of spending those 10 hours.
Did you invent that little trick of the vice grips for the offset jaws?
I don't think I invented it.
Cool, neat idea.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Dragon. Definitely interesting having the tanks out there like this.
Yeah, I never noticed that before. Of course, my shop don't have that problem.
Uh-uh.
They're under a roof. It just got cloudy as soon as it got.
Yes, sir. I do my best to focus. No rattle.
Solid.
Ooh, ah.
One more to go.
So as you can see, you can easily get that down to a process, knocking out different parts and just roll through it. Especially I've done the, for punching the holes, get it hot enough, get it in one